Hi there, this is Mark McRae, and today I am answering a question that I got from OTN that said, setting up companies, the pros and cons, offshore companies vs companies within your own country. Now, why I like this question is because I think it's one of the most important questions, but not for the reason that you might think. So, point number one, and probably the most important, is where do you intend to live for the rest of your life, right? Nothing financially will make a bigger impact on how you build your wealth than that one decision, and here's why. And they all kind of relates. So think about, why would somebody open a company offshore? They're usually for some kind of tax benefit, or they're trying to hide some money, or they are trying, think of Google, think of Apple. They have offshore companies in Ireland, so they pay a lower rate of tax. They actually export most of the money from Ireland to another company. And that's for another conversation. I can explain that, how the bigger companies are doing that, if anybody is interested. But it's a way of avoiding tax, right? So however you put it, that's basically what it is. But there's a more kind of difficult situation, and I know quite a few people who are in that situation. Say 10, 20 years ago, they decided to set themselves offshore, and they siphoned off some money offshore, and it's there, and it's fine, and it's everything else. But it doesn't do anything. It just sits there in a bank account, unused, and it's just numbers on a piece of paper. So if it's just numbers on a piece of paper, what's the point? If money is not used, it has no purpose, right? It really doesn't. If it's not working for you, it is kind of pointless if it's just sitting with zeros in a bank account. But the other problem is, and I've known people in different countries who have decided, okay, they've made a lot of money, now they need access to that money, but they can't get it, because they never declared the tax on the money, or however they got the money overseas. They now can no longer use it. Sorry. So what do? And in a lot of countries, they can actually negotiate. They can actually go to the tax authorities and say, I've got X amount of money. And they usually do it with a tax lawyer, and they'll say, okay, well, how do I bring that? How do I repatriate that money? And they pay a fine. Right? But you can't accumulate assets with the money that you technically don't have. So I always opted for wherever I lived, and I've lived in quite a few countries. And when I went to the countries, my intention was to live there forever or a very long time. So I always declared everything. And sometimes I felt a bit foolish, because I knew a lot of people who weren't paying tax, or they were avoiding tax. And here was I trying to do the right thing. And I've paid tax in every country I've ever been in the way that it should be done. And just as another side note on that, never try and cheat the tax man. They're usually the most whatever country you're in, if there's a government department that works well, it's usually the tax department. Don't think that you have a lawyer or an accountant or anybody else who's smarter than the tax man in your particular country. You're just not. So, and if you're worried about paying too much tax, earn more money. That's all there is to it, right? If you earn enough money, the tax doesn't become a problem. Sure, you might resent it, but it stops being an issue. Just don't try and do something silly. And I would caution anybody against any advice, regardless of who they are, about having offshore entities. Unless you're Google or Apple or, of that size, you're probably getting the wrong advice. But coming back to the reason if you should or you shouldn't do it. If you're in a country and you're starting a business and you want to grow your wealth, you want to buy properties, you want to buy bonds, you want to buy shares, you want to invest in things, you need all of your money with you. If you have it somewhere else, it's kind of like going to war, but half of your army is somewhere else, and you can't use it and you can't have access to it. So that my advice would be, unless there's a reason that I can't think of that's other than tax, I would not open offshore accounts. And it's also, when you have a lot of businesses, you have a lot of bank accounts, and I hate it. At one time I had, I think, 19 or 20 different bank accounts that you got to keep track of. And I try and simplify everything. There's nothing, makes me happier than when I just see a few bank accounts and I can control them rather than, lots of bank accounts from lots of different companies. And you don't have to track it. It's easy. So coming back to that point, don't do it unless there's some kind of reason. There are some kind of, I have heard of a lot of authors. There's a group of authors who I have an acquaintance of, and they have the IP of things that they produce sitting offshore as a defensive mechanism. And there is some kind of reasons for that, right? Sometimes if you get to that stage in wealth where you're buying boats and ships and yachts, and it's where the flag of that particular ship was declared, that's where the tax implication is. There can be cases for that. But for 99% of the people that I talk to that have a business in the country that they live, there is no reason to have an offshore account. It will complicate your life, and don't do it. I hope that helps. If you want to hear more about that, just let me know. Thanks for listening.